Hey guys, I'm Claire, the Fiddle Leaf Fig Girl, and today I want to talk about notching because I get so many questions about when to notch, where to notch, how to notch, and I want to go through everything today so that you can help your Fiddle Leaf Fig create new branches and create that really cool tree-like shape. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about what is notching. It may be a little bit intimidating, or maybe it sounds intimidating, but basically notching is just injuring your plant to cause it to put out new growth, or specifically new branches. And so what you're doing is you're actually just cutting into your plant to disrupt the flow of auxins or rooting hormones to tell your plant to put out new growth. The reason this works is that plants in the wild, if they're injured or if they get bitten by an animal, they actually send signals to that area of the plant to put out new branches or new growth. So basically what you're trying to do is injure your plant, not by cutting off the branch, but by doing as big of an injury as you can without actually severing the branch. And it tells your plant to put energy and new growth into that area and create a new branch. Now, there's a few reasons why we would want to notch our plant. So the first is maybe that instead of having a very, very tall, skinny fiddle leaf fig, which most people have, you actually want to have more of like a tree-like shape, or a fiddle leaf fig with it is starting to have a Y shape or like a canopy. And so instead of having one that just goes straight up with one stalk, you actually want it to branch out and become a tree over time. And so that's probably the most common reason that you would notch. A second reason is symmetry. So maybe you have one branch going off on this side and you want one branch going off on the other side too. So you're going to want to notch on that side to get another branch to give your tree a symmetrical, beautiful aesthetic. And then a third reason is balance. So maybe you have a tree that has a bunch of branches on one side and it's starting to lean, and you want it to have some branches on the other side. So notching can help to give your tree some balance. Or maybe you haven't rotated your tree in a long time, and so there's just a bunch of growth on one side and you want growth on the back side. You can actually notch the back side, turn your tree around, and have it grow towards the sunlight to give you a more symmetrical look. So whatever your reason for notching, it's really, really easy to do, and you really can't fail. So don't be intimidated. I'll walk you through exactly how to do it. Okay, so first off, there's a few things you're going to need before you get started. You really want to start with a healthy plant. It's important to not notch a plant that isn't growing or has any sort of pests or disease, because you're not going to be successful with that. You don't want to create an additional injury on a sick plant. So you really want to start with a healthy plant. The next thing you need is something sharp. And so we actually have these pruning shears that are super beautiful, very sharp, and they're perfect for notching, because if you use a knife or some pruning shears that are too dull, you'll actually just create scar tissue on your plant and injure the plant. You want to make a very, very sharp cut that does not cause scar tissue or crush or bruise your plant, but actually causes a sharp cut to disrupt the flow of sap or auxin, and then cause your plant to put out a new branch. So very, very sharp, clean pruning shears or a knife or something like that you can do a very sharp cut without crushing or bruising the stem of your plant. And then the last thing is a rooting hormone. So my favorite is propagation promoter. It is this really cool substance. You can spray it on, you can dab it on, you could pour it on, but it actually is a rooting hormone that tells your plant to put new growth towards that area. You can also use it for propagating or cloning your plant. And you can also just use it as a fertilizer too. So it's a really, really cool, versatile product, but you need some sort of a rooting hormone so that at the place that you do your notch or your scoring cut, you put additional rooting hormone to increase your chance of success. Okay, so before you notch your plant, I really recommend taking a picture, because you're going to want to remember the before and after. So if you take a picture, you print it out, you can kind of decide, where do I want my tree to branch? Where does it make sense to cut? And then you can identify those areas on the picture to just kind of gut check exactly where you want to try your notching. Okay, so let's talk about where to notch your fiddle leaf fig. So this is really important. So the first thing I want to encourage you to do is always notch the top 1/3 of your plant. So you don't want to have new branches coming out at the base of your plant. That just doesn't give a good aesthetic. So as your plant is growing up towards the sun, you want to notch on the top area, the top 1/3 of your plant. There's a couple reasons for this. First is that there is naturally more growth towards the top of your plant, where it's putting out new leaves and it's having new growth, and it's just more likely to be successful if you notch towards the top of the plant. The second is that's where it's going to aesthetically look better to have new branches at the top of the plant. And so it's really important just to kind of take a look at the top third of your plant, figure out where you want your new branches to start, keeping in mind that your plant is always going to be growing up. And so you want to kind of start with the end in mind of what is the end shape that you want your plant to be. Okay, and so you're always going to want to do your notches between nodes. So nodes are those little raised sort of areas on your plant where you see like a ring around the plant, and that is just basically where your plant has growth, dormant leaf buds. And so all of the leaf buds of your plant are hidden within those nodes. And so you're going to want to notch in the internodal space between those nodes. And then the new growth is actually going to come out of those nodes. So the nodes just look like a little ring or a little scar around your plant, and they're usually about an inch apart. And so you're just going to want to notch directly above or below those nodes, and then it's going to cause your plant to put out new growth at those nodes. So when I'm doing notching, I recommend doing 3 to 5 notches per session per plant. And usually we have about 30 to 50% success ratio of these actually turning into new branches. And so you don't want to do too many notches and really like injure your plant, and you don't want to cause too much growth all at once. So 3 to 5 notches is usually the sweet spot where, maybe you'll get 1 to 2 to 3 branches, new branches coming out. And so I recommend trying to kind of identify where you most want your branches, and then doing 3 to 5 different notches in places that you would like to see branches in the future. So how long does it take for notching to be successful? So typically it takes 2 to 4 weeks before you'll start seeing a new leaf bud come out. And so I would give it some time, make sure you're fertilizing your plant, make sure it's getting water, that it's getting sunlight. And if you don't see anything after about 8 weeks, I would try it again. I would say if nothing has happened by 8 weeks, it's probably failed and you probably want to start and try again. But 2 to 4 weeks is typically when we see the first signs of new growth. So you can really notch any time of year. Houseplants that are indoors don't really have a winter dormancy, because basically plants determine what time of year it is by the length of the days and the temperature. Because the temperature indoors isn't really fluctuating very much, and actually the light and the length of the day isn't fluctuating as much as a plant outside, they don't really have a true dormancy. So you can really notch any time of year. So I will say the winter or the spring is probably going to be the most successful. You could start notching in the winter, knowing that it's going to take 2 to 4 weeks, and knowing that a plant is going to naturally be growing the best in the spring. So I really would start in late winter, early spring, start notching and start getting that new growth, because your plant is going to naturally grow a little bit better in the spring and the summer. Okay, so let's talk about how to actually make your notch or your cut. So basically you just want to take a very, very sharp implement and make a cut that is, you can be pretty rough with your plant. What I do is I take our pruning shears and I just put it on the stem and I kind of just shake it around like that. You want to do maybe 1/4 of an inch deep and at least 1/3 away around the stem to create enough of an injury to your plant that it actually gets a good signal. The most common thing I see as why notching fails is that people don't make a deep enough cut or a big enough cut. So really be aggressive here. You don't want to cut off the whole branch, but you want to make a big enough injury that you'll have a big result. Okay, so let's give you some tips to make your notching a bit more successful. So the first thing is to be more aggressive with your cuts and cut maybe a little bit deeper than you think. So really 1/4 of an inch in, make sure you're cutting until you see that white sac come out. Make sure you're being very aggressive and, going deep enough to cause a big enough injury that you're going to have that result of new growth. The second thing is using a propagation promoter or a rooting hormone. This is going to double your chance of success. So if you make your cut, you're going to want to dab on with a cotton ball, or maybe just kind of pour on propagation promoter. This really, really helps your plant get the signal to put out new growth. And so that will really increase your chance of success. And then fertilize your plant. Any plant that is putting out new growth needs nutrients. And so using a Fiddle Leaf Fig fertilizer, I will link our fertilizer below. You can fertilize your plant the day that you do the notching, and it will spur new growth throughout your plant, both in the notched areas and at the other growth areas of your plant where it's naturally putting out new leaves. Make sure that it's getting enough light. It's really, really important to have light. If you want growth, you need light. And then also just making sure your plant is healthy. So making sure it doesn't have root rot, that it's in good soil, that it has good drainage, that it's just happy and healthy. And so if you want to learn more about how to keep your Fiddle Leaf Fig green and gorgeous, we have tons of resources. I have a full webinar. I actually wrote a book called The Fiddle Leaf Fig Expert that I will link below. And you can always like and subscribe to our channel, and I will do different notching tutorials, and I'll show you my before and after of the Fiddle Leaf Figs that I've recently notched. You can always ask a question, Claire at fiddleleaffigplant.com, and I will actually tell you where I think you should notch your plant. And I hope this video has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.